Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Come on in. We have a great webinar speaking about student communication. We have two of our greatest, I say greatest, speakers here. They are from Trellis. And so we're going to be talking about how to communicate with your students. Some of this stuff you may already know, but some of it you probably would be surprised or amazed. So we're going to be talking about some best practices when it comes to speaking with your students. If you can, please do in the chat, tell us where you're from. And of course, your name. We'd like to see who is all attending today. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a second, guys, so I can look at the chat here. Okay. I don't see anyone putting anything in the chat yet. Are you able to put something in the chat? Let me see here.
I'll just set out.
Yeah, I think I set it up where they can chat. There we go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Come on in. Please do. As I stated earlier, we're going to be speaking about student communications, best practices, and speaking or communicating with your students. This webinar will be recorded, so I will be sending out the webinar recording anywhere from about 2 to 3 business days afterwards. Also, if you can, please complete our survey. We have a short survey at the end, and we would be very grateful if you can complete that. Again, it just kind of helps us, to know how we're doing, and also to hear back from you to see what type of topics you would like to hear in the future. So, in looking at the chat, it looks like we got quite a number of people coming in. We have Concordia, Stillman College, welcome, Hines Community College. Thank you so much for attending. We have Lone Star. Come on in. We have quite a few people. Awesome. Another person from Lone Star. We have Tuscaloosa. Yes. Hey. Again, this webinar will be recorded, so I will send this out to you as soon as our communications department do their little, I say tricks to it, and then we'll send it out to you. Okay, we have Kahoma. Welcome, Kahoma. And again, if you can complete the survey at the end, we will be grateful for that as well. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. I'm going to allow a couple more people to come in before we get started. So first we have Liz Nguyen. Liz is a student services support lead at Trellis. She is an accredited financial counselor and received her master's in finance from Texas Tech University. Liz works directly with colleges and universities to help them develop strategic communication plans for students. She project manages campaigns serving 2-year, 4-year public and private institutions, ranging from enrollment retention and stop out. Liz and her team have coordinated over 10 million text messages. We also have Fidencio Tamez, better known as Fide. Fide has over a decade of enrollment management experience in the areas of admissions, recruitment, and financial aid at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley in Texas. Valley and Texas A&M University, Kingsville. He received both his bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. He serves now as a student services support specialist at Trellis, where he specializes in project management of communication campaigns and contact creation for text messages and call scripts.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yes, thank you both. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I do see Bishop has come in and Tuskegee. Thank you guys for joining us. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay.
Looks good. All
Uh,
right.
Well, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Teresa, and hi, everyone. Thanks again for being here with us today. Let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start by defining a communication plan, right? So that is, of course, where we want to start. So as you see here on the slide, it's an end-to-end plan for delivering strategic messages to key audiences. So you're essentially outlining who you're trying to reach, what all do you need to communicate, and how you will do it. So the who and the what will help you and your team understand who should be getting what message. If you're reaching out to your newly admitted students, just think of how their messaging may differ from the messaging that your current students need to receive. And the how defines what type of methods you'll be using to send the messages to your students. Of course, thankfully today, we actually have several methods to relay this information to our students. We have email, text, mail, the post office mail, just to be clear on that, and then phone calls, and we also have social media. I do think this covers most of the platforms that we have available today. If you think of some that I missed, just I guess add them in the chat. But I do think this covers most of it. And a comprehensive plan should include all of these methods or a combination of a few. So you don't have to have all of these methods to your communication plan. You can just have a combination of a few. And of course, knowing your audience and at times the type of information that you're wanting to send is going to help you figure out which methods are best to use. And today we will focus on text, phone calls, and print mail, since this is where Trellis can actually come in and help. We go to the next slide, please. Okay, so to get started on outlining a plan, you can start by asking yourself a few important questions. So where is your audience? To know your audience, it is important to know where they are, right? So what stage they're at right now. We know that some students like to text and do not open emails as much. And knowing this will help you meet them where they are. Some students may prefer to email, and that's okay. But for example, maybe you're trying to reach high school seniors slated to start college in the fall. And in this situation, a combination of a postcard, because of course, their parents are home and they'll see it when it arrives, and text messages could be the best approach to getting your message across. There is research out there that actually tells you which generations like to text versus receiving a phone call, which open emails the most. And of course, these findings or research may or may not apply to your student population, but that's okay because you know your students best. So just using these findings and what you know about your student population will be helpful in figuring out the best approach to creating a communication plan for them. So the next question is, who owns what platform? So over communicating may lead your students to stop paying attention. Even if they need those messages, they may just stop paying attention because of how much information they're receiving. So ask yourself who owns what platform to avoid any duplication and over communicating. Understanding who's sending your emails, your texts, or making your phone calls will allow everyone involved to know what message the students are receiving at any given time and how they're receiving them. So it can be the phone call or emails, and just knowing what's happening at any given time is going to be helpful. So for example, your financial aid office may be sending an email blast to students regarding financial aid processes. So whether it's the FAFSA or verification, and this is happening. So maybe you want to communicate some events happening on campus, but then maybe you want to do a text instead, because then these are just multiple emails that the students are receiving, and you want to make sure that you avoid that email fatigue. The next question actually ties in with this last one. So who is already communicating with your students? Once you figure out the platforms, then you can figure out and who owns which platform, you can figure out who's actually communicating with them. So knowing, who owns the platform will tell you who's communicating with them and how often. Or hopefully it can tell you how often. So some of you here today may actually be using our texting services in addition to yours, or maybe we're just doing the phone calls and you're doing the texting. But all of those services should be taken into consideration when you're creating your plan to avoid sending the same nudge too many times to the same population. Think maybe Trellis is sending a FastForward reminder and then your team wants to do a call the same day. That's really not efficient. So you want to work together, with us or any other help that you may have to just make sure that, you do a text and then strategically place the calls as a follow-up in a few weeks. This applies also to, outsourcing, or if you have temporary help. I think I did mention that earlier. It may not apply every semester or every week that you're sending communication, but just knowing when you're outsourcing or when that help is going to come in is going to help you just have that big picture of your communication strategy. So another question to help you brainstorm how to reach your students is to have an idea of what platform has experienced the most growth in the last year. It may be the platform that you're already using. Your students are on there, so keep on doing that. But it may mean that it's time to learn a new one. I know it's been a while since TikTok came out, but I remember when it first did, everyone was on there. So if it means that the students are going to listen and pay attention. It may be intimidating to learn a new one, but you can actually just go ahead and learn it so that you can just keep your students engaged. And we do know that social media actually changes more often than our traditional way of communicating. I know I said we won't focus on social media, but that at least we do know it changes so often than just sending a simple text message or a phone call. But because the new apps are coming out every year, but if your students are on social media a little bit more or on a specific new platform, then just use this to your advantage to get the information out to them and keep them engaged at the same time. So not only is the platform important, but so is the content, right? So yeah, you can learn TikTok and be on there, but if the content doesn't attract your students, then it doesn't make sense. So for those incoming students, of course, important reminders and deadlines may be the bulk of their communication. And that's understandable because we got to get them ready to successfully start college. And yes, they are important, but they are very transactional. I think everyone can agree. So you want to also engage your students with other content. For example, you can send information to them to get them connected to organizations and clubs of their interest, as well as, academic and wellness or mental support information to get them through that first semester. So this strikes a balance between moving your students forward in the college journey, but also keeping them engaged and connected to your institution. This leads to the next question. So how will you organize your content? So an example would be to separate your content by your new students and then your current students. The messaging for these two groups may differ from time to time. Your incoming students may need to, or not incoming students, but those first time in college students may need to receive communication to help them navigate those various financial aid processes that happen once they start the semester, or maybe they didn't complete them prior to starting and then they need to complete these. But your third and fourth year students may already be used to these, so they may not need to receive the same type of content. So organizing your content by audience is actually really helpful in narrowing down the content that needs to go out to each group. And then finally, it is helpful and important to communicate, or not to communicate, but to include in your plans how often you will be communicating. So this will help ensure that you're not over communicating by sending the same nudge too many times. And this can be using every platform that you have, or even just text messaging, but just sending it way too many times. We know that that's not helpful. And actually, I think some of you probably know this, but depending on how you're texting and what platform you're using, texting too many times may result in a high stop out rate. We do know that happens. So if a student opts out from receiving messages, again, depending on your platform, this may mean that the student's not going to be able to receive any future messages at all. I'm not talking about next year they'll be able to receive them. No, if they opt out unless they let you know, hey, start texting me again, they'll never be able to receive messages. So you do want to be mindful, mindful in, I guess, keeping track of how often you are sending them messages. And we will cover some best practices here shortly that can help you ensure that your students stay engaged. And I think that covers this slide. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Fide.
Thank you, Liz. Conducting an audit or evaluating your communication plan will always be the starting point of when it comes to planning your communication. There are always ways or things that we can do better. And this doesn't mean that we did something wrong, but there's always room for improvement. Just like Liz mentioned in the previous slide, maybe there are new technologies available, maybe a new CRM, or a new communication channel, like a new social media app that you can integrate in your plan. Remember, on this step specifically, this is where we sit down, come together, and reflect on last year's communication plan and start thinking about what can we reuse, what do we remove, and what do we need to add. In the case that you don't have a communication plan at all and you're going to start from scratch, the first thing that you will need to ask yourself is, why do we need a communication plan? Go ahead, write it down, and outline your need for the plan and continue moving to step number 2. If there's something that I know from experience is that we are always chasing a number, right? And the funny thing is that that number kept increasing every year. In addition, I remember we will be chasing the enrollment number. When I moved to financial aid, we were chasing the FAFSA completion number. So when the goals and projection for the new academic year have been set, then you can ask yourself, how do we get to that number? And here is where you will define your objective based on these goals and start creating strategy. For example, for new students, you can define your topics and your communication timeline based on your enrollment type. For current students, you can define your topics and communication timeline based on the academic calendar. Once you have defined this, then you will need to create strategies and select the best communication channel for each topic. In the production and content creation step, it is important to start early and set realistic timelines and deadlines. This will help you plan in advance so you can be more efficient and less stressed. This will also help you and your staff, stay on track. And if the plan seems too big or too complicated, you can also split the process into phases like the preparation phase, the implementation phase, and the review phase. It is best practice to also divide the content by department. So this way, each department will be in charge of creating their own content and keeping up with deadlines so the production process keeps moving forward. It is also a good idea to standardize the way that you create your content. And to do that, you can start by implementing templates. As simple as having a document with boxes or columns like department name, campaign name, the type of channel of communication. It can be email, text, call, letter, postcard. Will this new communication require graphics? If so, then you need to make a mark to contact your marketing team. So you can also add like point of contact, start date, when is the deadline, and of course, like a big box for your content. This way, once you have one template created, every time that you need to create a new communication, you can just go and pull up this document and start filling in the blanks. For development, you're in like a calendar or a plan. We know that you can only become more efficient if you collaborate, you plan, and you keep track of things. We're talking about internal communication between departments and coming together as one. From my experience, having designated communication meetings work great. Just to give you an example, we used to have two communication meetings in the same week, a department meeting and a division meeting. At the department meeting, we will review the communications and events happening for the week. This will help us out prepare for the division meeting where we will update everyone about the communication plan for the week. Then we will just sit and go around the table, listening to everybody's update. And this meeting will help us keep everybody informed. And it will also give us the opportunity to collaborate and make sure that we're not doubling effort. Also, it is important for you to find a way to keep track and project manage your communication. It can be done directly, maybe into your CRM, or as simple as using a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, outlining your weekly or your monthly communications. And you can share this file, I don't know, maybe via Microsoft Teams with everyone in your department so they can have it available at all times. Another simple tool that we can use is Microsoft Outlook calendars. This one works really well. And how do I know this? Well, this is how we try to manage our campaigns here at Trellis. And and again, these are just basic, simple examples. But at the end of the day, uh, please, you need to find a way or tools that works best for you and your team to be able to keep track and manage your communication plan. If possible, I strongly recommend trying to automate your campaign. So once you set it, you just forget it. Um, and just like you need to keep track of your communication plan, you must find a way to be able to analyze your communication effectiveness. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how to do it exactly because every institution is different and you all have different resources, but it is crucial that you find a way to measure your communication campaign effectiveness. Running new report against the same data that you use to send the communication, in my opinion, is the easiest way to evaluate the effectiveness of a communication. I'm going to give you an example. If you're calling students to register for classes, you can measure the effectiveness of the call right away. You run the same report after you're done with the call and then compare the numbers. Um, Evaluating your communication effectiveness will help you make informed decisions on redesigning, recreating, or you know what, maybe it's good. So you just keep using the same content and the communication channel. If you're not already doing this, I will recommend for you to reach out, ask for help. Maybe your business analyst can help you with the reports. Maybe your marketing department uh, will help you conduct analytics on things like website traffic, email opening rate, text replies, or unsubscribed users. And at the end of the day, we need to be ready to adapt and react. Technology is changing, just like Liz mentioned, faster than ever, and we need to be able to keep up with it. Back in the day, not too far back, I remember it was just letters, phone calls, and postcards. Now, a couple of years after, on top of that, we're using text messages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, all these social media channels. So Liz also mentioned this. Do not be afraid of integrating new communication channels to your communication plan. Embrace the change. Remember that change is always good and it helps keep things feeling fresh. Um, Next slide, please. I know this it's a lot, but I want to give you a few key takeaways. Always try to define strategies since the beginning to determine content creation objectives. If possible, visualize and outline your content creation process and create calendars. This will help you manage your campaigns and to know what's happening at all times. Remember to choose content type and distribution channels based on your topics. And it is very important to designate roles and responsibilities for each task in order to be able to keep moving forward and meeting deadlines. And collaboration, talk to each other, collaborate internally, because without communication, collaboration cannot happen. If possible, again, find a way to automate your campaign process. This will help you in the long run. And finally, it is important to be able to measure performance and effectiveness to be able to adapt accordingly. And now I'm going to pass it to Liz to talk about best practices for text messages.
Thanks, Fide. All right, so we will cover best practices for phone and print mail. Fide will get to those, but the text messages. So let's get. I feel like most of the communication that we may be doing today include text messages. So hopefully these are helpful. So you want to make sure that your website and resources, as well as contact information, are updated before sending out any type of communication. So this can be emails or even making phone calls, but definitely for text messages. Of course, if sometimes the text messages, we are limited in the characters, so we may direct them. And I'm probably skipping ahead to, I know that's a best practice later on, but we may direct them to our website. But if the information is outdated, this will only further confuse the students, and the students, it may cause just unnecessary questions, or just cause them to have even more questions because they click on the link that we send them, and then all the information that they're seeing is outdated. So make sure those are updated. We also have learned that students actually respond better to personalized communication than to non-personalized communication. So you want to include their name in the text messages as much as possible, along with a very clear call to action. Now, of course, there will be some messages that are not transactional, and that's good because, again, we want to have a balance, right, of those transactional messages and those, I guess, let's say, feel good messages. But that's okay. These won't require a call to action, but that is okay. But at least, including that personalization is going to be helpful. And also using professional text speak. This probably applies more to text messages than it does to a phone call or an email, because this is where we may be restricted the most in terms of content length. So it is important to make sure the short content is used only when appropriate and when it makes sense. If you do have the characters, please spell out everything. But if you are needing to make some extra space, then, for example, you can use Q for questions or abbreviate some words that everybody mostly should know what they are. So only whenever it makes sense. And another best practice, if your platform allows it, of course, is to engage your students with questions and action prompts. So this is something, if you do use Trellis texting, I think you're familiar with it, but we do this a lot. We use those yes and no questions at the end of the messages. Yeah, it may sound complicated if you're not used to it, especially if you're concerned about that, those inbound messages, all the yes and the no's. But it can actually be an easy task if you have some automation to your platform. So if your platform allows it, it's just, a matter of learning how to do that. And then, like, I think Fida mentioned this, once you set it, then it just goes and you don't have to really worry about it much. It's also good to predict student questions and have those answers ready prior to sending out the messages. This is going to help you with timely responses and just being ready for all that inbound that you may receive. So yeah, I guess you can consider this to be part of your response strategy to ensure that students are receiving answers in a timely manner. So some ideas on how to, have those answers ready is to just accumulate them as you send campaigns. Just accumulate helpful information that you think students may have questions about for any upcoming campaign that you're planning. So you can create templates, you can call them, FAQ templates, and just keep on updating them as you create future campaigns. And if you were not able to answer a question, then just know where to direct your students. Just have that one good point of contact for every campaign that you're creating. So in case you're not able to help them or whoever is responding, they know exactly where to direct them. And I said this earlier, most of the messages that we send are going to be limited to a character count. It may be 200 for some, or maybe 160 for others, but you're still limited, which is actually probably a good thing because we want the text to be short and informative and to the point. If we wanted it to be lengthy, then we can send an email, right? So I mentioned this several times today, but you do want to avoid just over communicating, right? A lot of us, I know it from personal experience, a lot of us think that overdoing it will get the students to take action. But most of the time, this is actually not true. If you can actually go to the next slide, Teresa, please. Yeah, so okay, thank you. So nothing will confuse your students or disengage them than a message that does not relate to them. This is a best practice for text message, but it's also for phone calls, print, anything that you're communicating. So we always recommend that you segment messages when possible, especially if you're doing the messages in-house, then it's a little bit easier to deal with the data there. I do understand it's harder when you're working with somebody outside of your team or your institution, but if it is possible, segment those messages so that you're only sending messages to students that relate to them. So for example, if you're wanting to buy or to remind students to buy their cap and gown, that's just a very specific example I know, but it's a good one. So obviously that's only for graduating seniors. So there's no need to send this reminder to the entire student body. If it is possible, just segment your data so that you're only reaching those students who are graduating in the next semester or the next, and who actually need to buy their cap and gown. Also, if it is possible at all, you want to text your students from the same phone number. Some carriers now, you probably have noticed, can give you the option to mark a phone number as spam if it isn't saved to your phone number. So, I'm sorry, to your phone. So, asking the student to save your number when you first text them will avoid them to, I guess, will avoid the carriers as from blocking your number or making it appear as spam. Because any future message will appear as spam if the student doesn't recognize it and they mark it as spam. So just be careful with that. I know we may have several numbers that you're going to be using to text your students, and that is okay. But just let them know ahead of time, right? So most of the time we want to introduce the campaign to the students anyways. This is a perfect spot or a perfect time to do it, and just let them know, hey, save this number. And we'll also occasionally, send you a text from this number. That way, they can save all those numbers. So these next best practices actually relate to your inbound communication. Yeah, we're talking about sending the messages out, but of course, if you're sending messages out, you can expect to receive responses. So you need to have some strategies to manage that as well. So we do know that not everything can be handled via text. Texts are great for reminders and getting information quickly to the students, but not everything's going to be handled via text. And that is okay. Just make sure to set those expectations with your students at the start of any campaign. So let them know what they can expect to receive via text. For example, the hours of operation, and then how fast they can expect a response. And you may need to direct the students to other mediums. So I mentioned this earlier, right? Maybe your text, you're limited and you can't get everything that you need out to the students. So you need to send more information than your text can fit. So then just be sure to direct them to other mediums. This is, for example, your website. So that's one of the reasons why it is important to keep your websites updated. You can also refer them to those documents that we talked about earlier. If you have a good FAQ that maybe you can host on your website and create like a URL, then have those ready to just send to the students for reference. Or you can actually send an email beforehand. We have seen this strategy before, and it is helpful when it's paired together. So send an email with all of the information that you need the students to know, or just that detail information that you want to send out, and then send a text as a reminder, and then let them know that they can reference that email. Next slide, please. Okay, so although you should be honest about the response time, especially if it's going to be long, it is important to try as much as possible to respond in a timely manner. This will ensure that you keep your students engaged and completing tasks quicker than, of course, if we make them wait a whole day for a response. So we actually have learned that the bulk of their responses, and we have sent millions of messages, come in within those first few hours. Yeah, some will trickle in, later throughout the day or even the next day, but the majority of those responses are going to come in right after you send a message. So those next few hours, couple of hours. And of course, this is going to vary from campaign to campaign, but we have seen this. So you want to make sure that if your students are asking those questions, you get them answers while they're engaged, because if they don't, they're going to get the message, they're going to send you something. And then if they don't hear back, they're going to forget, right? They're going to go to their next class. They're going to be done with the day. And then really maybe the message wasn't as effective. So just make sure that you have somebody ready to respond when you hit send on that message. And finally, you want to create an inbox management strategy on how you will be handling the inbound communication. So yes, responding in a timely manner is technically an inbound strategy, but you also want to know who is going to be responding to these messages. Is it going to be 5 of us? Is it just going to be one person for a couple of hours and then we're going to switch? So whatever works for you, just make sure you have something in hand and a strategy in place. And this will help your team stay organized, and of course, ensure that every student is responding or getting responses. And as I have here, don't leave them hanging. Next slide, please. That does pretty much wrap up the best practices for text messages. But here, this slide illustrates all of these in a way put together in a short message. So when we draft content, we keep this in mind. We say the anatomy of a text. And again, you probably sound like a broken record, but personalization is important. Students will respond to these messages more than if they're not personalized and just generalized. So you want to include personalization in your messaging. You also want to clearly state the purpose of the text message, as well as a clear call to action, and then give them any resources and or contact information that will be useful to the student. So here in this example, I'm telling Fide, exactly what we need from him. I'm addressing him and I'm telling him that we need him to pay his balance. We're telling him how he can go into his portal. And of course, he probably should know his portal because he's a student. He probably does a lot of other stuff there. So, just telling him to go there, or that he can also stop by the business office. And then we're giving him a deadline of July 31st. We do also provide him with resources in the event that he needs additional assistance in completing this task. And the resources in this message, it's we're your resource. So text us back. We're here to help you and guide you through the process. Or we give him a number if he wants to pick up the phone and call. I personally, even though if you look at the research, it would put me in the pool of, Liz prefers to receive a text. Well, I guess I'm old fashioned. I don't know why. If I really want to make sure something gets done, I pick up the phone and call. I'm like, send me an email that we talked on the phone, and that's fine. So I do appreciate always including that phone number or having that phone number to call, because a lot of students prefer to call, and that's okay. And that actually wraps up the best practices for text messages. So Fide will now cover print mail and phone calls.
Thank you, Liz. It is important to know that some students still may prefer tangible physical communication. And although print communications is much more expensive than digital channels, there are messages that your students will rather have in their hands than on their phones or their computers. Just like text messaging, personalizing your print mail can engage your students and increase student interaction with your institution. And Keep in mind that flimsy paper flyers will likely be ignored by most students. So if you decide to create print mail, go all in. Try to print high quality materials to express that you value your students through the communication you deliver. Like any other form of communication, too much mail is not a good idea. So try to consolidate your efforts and use print communication to send clear messages. Sending student postcards may not have a great of an impact unless you plan to follow up and reinforce your message. It is always a good idea to collaborate with your team to develop a follow-up communication plan to optimize your print. Another thing that I want to mention is that you need to consider the production time if you decide to go print. I would say 3 or 4 weeks will be a good time frame to develop print materials. And I'm talking about requesting graphics, content creation, print materials, and of course the shipping time. It is very important to plan ahead if you decide to use print mail communication. Some examples of print mail that will be relevant for your new student nowadays will include acceptance letters, acceptance packages, a FAFSA postcard with your school code, with deadlines and contact information, open house invitations, and why not scholarship award letters. And like I said before, you need to remember to follow up after you send the postcard with maybe an email or a text, just in case the letter, it gets lost in the mail. So if it doesn't reach your intended audience, you might want to make sure that to get the message out by following up. Moving on with the call campaign. And even though we're moving away from using our phone to make actual phone calls, we believe there's still a time and a place for a call campaign. If you decide to call your student, please make sure that you make the most out of the call. Call campaigns are a great way to connect directly with your students. So when you decide to make phone calls, you need to pay attention on the content and the purpose of the call. This way, you can utilize your staff and your resources wisely, since most of these calls that go out are for topics that can generate and will generate questions. So calls are perfect for where we're dealing with deadlines or processes that require some steps in order to be completed. For example, if you decide to call students with an outstanding balance about an upcoming payment deadline, you right in there will have the opportunity to hear why these students are not making payments. During the call, maybe you can direct them straight to financial aid to try to find more money to pay for school. Maybe they're just having issues with their student account and you can direct them to your IT department for assistance. Maybe you want to promote your payment plan and you can guide them over the phone through the setup process. So these are just like quick examples of things that can happen during a call interaction. So if you decide to implement a call campaign, um, I'm going to go over some best practices that will help you with that. So it is very important to have accurate data and that the timing is right. Be sure to give students enough time to take action after the call. Train your staff. This is very important. Train your staff on things like on etiquette, information security regulations, like FERPA, and make sure that you practice or they practice the script and know what is the main purpose of the call. And while you're working on writing down your script, just like the text message, try to think about all the different scenarios that can happen during the call. That way you can prepare in advance for all the what if, right? If you talk to the student, what are you going to say? If you need to leave a voicemail, what are you going to say? If you talk to the parent, what can you say to the parent? Or if someone else answers the phone, what are you going to say? So try to create different scenarios while you're working on one script. Um, Also, there's also a good idea to have a designated person available for call escalation while the calls are happening. Be Try to be cultural aware, just in case you need to create scripts in different languages. And same thing in the text. Have your FAQs in hand, just in case you get asked more questions. And if possible, try to make phone calls with computer access, just in case you need to find information on the spot. And be aware of your audience. You need to know who you're talking to. So if you are calling new students for enrollment purposes, these are going to be high school students that are going to be in school all day during the week. So maybe you can schedule calls from 4 to 6 during the week, or maybe call them on a Saturday, after 10 a.m. If you're going to be calling your current students, find gap during the week, like activity periods where you can actually talk to them during the week while they're going to school. And this can be between 10 a.m. or noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you are going to contact your grad students or your alumni, this can be full-time employed. So maybe the weekdays after 5 p.m. will be a good time to place phone calls. Another tip that I want to give you guys is that don't forget to ask whoever is doing the phone calls to dial and smile. Smiling has a positive effect on the sound of your voice, and it makes you sound more friendly, I guess. So it is a good idea to place little mirrors by the phones so your staff won't forget to smile while they're on the phone. Next slide, please. And last but not least, at the end of the day, when you have set your communication plan objectives, your strategies, your topics, your communication channels, and the frequency, and it's time to create the actual content, please don't forget that personalization is key. Avoid jargon. Think about your audience and what you're really trying to communicate. Always try to include a call to action. Be specific and use clear, short instructions. They're more likely to drive to action. Um, just like Liz did mention on the tech, don't forget to include deadlines. Deadlines are key, and provide resources if you can, and always include some type of contact information. Get creative, make it fun. It's You can use multimedia, you can use GIFs. Just again, think about the audience that you're trying to engage. Develop a quality control process. KEYS. Don't forget to test everything before it goes out. And remember to follow the KISS principle. Just keep it short and simple. And before we wrap up with the presentation, I would like to mention that if you're going to implement a new communication plan, or if you were given the task to redesign your current communication plan, do not feel overwhelmed. You can always break it down into little pieces. You can work one piece at a time. So think about breaking down your full academic year into semesters, semesters into months, months into weeks. And before you know it, boom, you have your master communication plan ready to go at no time. And guess what? If you need help, we're here to help. You can always reach out to us. So if you have any questions, or you would like to connect with us for training or more information, um, down below, you're going to find our contact information and resources that we use to create our content. So please do not hesitate to contact us. And thank you for being here. I don't know, Liz, anything, Teresa, that pretty much wraps up the presentation right on time.
Yeah, right on time. Thank you so much. I think we have our contact information on the next slide, right, Teresa? I think we have some time for questions. But if you don't have any right now and you think of any, or you need some additional information, just send us an email.
Yes, I'm going to open the floor. I'm going to keep it open for a little bit, just for some questions. If you have any questions or comments, we are getting some comments in the chat. Thanking you for the presentation, both Liz and Fide, great job. I do like the dial with the smile. And I did have a comment, someone like the KISS principle as well. Awesome, awesome information. Again, this webinar has been recorded, and I will be sending out the recording to everyone. If you can, please take the short survey. It'll pop up here in a minute. We will have a FAFSA completion roundtable discussion at the end of the month. So I will be sending it out to you as well. So that would be our next hot topic. We try to talk about FAFSA every year around this time. So even if you have some new administrators that's coming in and you want to, hear from other schools as to what they're doing to be effective when it comes to getting those numbers, getting those students to complete the FAFSA. Please do join us, and we'll be sending that information out to you soon as well. So, and also if Trellis partners, Project Success Institutions, if you don't have a communication campaign in the works, please contact your ISC. And so we can get that started. We can do a retention campaign, an enrollment campaign, FAFSA campaign. So we would be more than happy to help you out with that in all areas, and text, calls, and some print mail as well. So if you don't have that already on your calendar, please contact your ISC so we can get that started for you. And those campaigns can run throughout the whole semester. So as Liz and Fide mentioned earlier, we can set it as automatic. You'll know that your student is being, contacted, maybe once every other week, with a call of action or even a motivational message, just making sure that we keep it in contact with the student. So please do contact your ISC if you haven't, to get that communication plan in the works. Well, it looks like don't have any questions, any more content information for my chat. So I guess I would close out. I don't want to close too early because I remember someone had commented that, oh, you closed it out too early, and I had a question. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm allowing for any other questions that might come through. So I'll give it just a couple more seconds before I let you go. But don't leave the room. Remember, I want you to complete the survey, because we do want your feedback. Thank you again, Liz and Fide.
The question may be being typed at this moment, right?
I know, right?
We're working on it.
We're working on it. Okay. Well, if you do have a question, you can definitely contact me or Liz or Fide. We'll be more than happy. Or your ISC if you're a Project Success Institution. You were saying something, Fide?
Okay. No, I'm just saying thank you,
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks all.